Hey guys, John Wetmore here out of Atlanta. I'm gonna touch on a quick subject. Actually just had an agent call me, asked a question about a missed sale, which was cool. So we're gonna kind of break it down, ask him a couple questions on it, and he was sitting a final expense appointment. I think it said was like 60 years old. I don't remember the exact age. And he showed the guy like, he basically broke down the appointment was up front. We figured out he had $300 a month left in his budget after he gets Social Security income, after all his bills, expenses, all that. He had $300 left over when the agent went through the client financial inventory. So they figured out that with detail. Asked, what the reasoning for the insurance was, who was going to hurt, what the why is, whatever. And it was the daughter. At the end of the appointment, we kind of fast forward there. He showed him, 3 different prices. It was like 40, 50, $60 a month, and was told that he couldn't afford it. So I started asking some questions, and this is a part like when agents are new, they miss this part. Like he's like, I got a good why. His daughter was it was gonna be horrific for his daughter. And I said, define horrific. And he says, well, I know the meaning of it, but what do you mean define it? I said, explain to me what horrific looks like in her life. Like, give me details. And he's like, well, I don't know. I said, all right, well, what did you ask further? And he said, well, I tried to ask what that looks like, and the client kept deflecting with humor. And I was like, all right. So I'm thinking, and I remember when I was new, when clients would do that, like, and they would say something and laugh, I would laugh too, which ruined the entire appointment, right? Because if I don't take it seriously, how the hell is he going to? So now I remember, like, fast forward when I figured out how important me controlling an appointment was. If someone said something comical about it, which they do, I would just keep a serious face. So for me in that situation, and again, this is very common with new agents, I like to find out a lot of detail, especially in final expense appointments, about who they know that's died recently, who they know that's gotten sick recently, have they had to deal with any situations, death, funerals, if they know costs. And by the way, this guy didn't have any insurance. So when you start getting details, like if I ask, Bob, who do you know recently that's died? Or you can even be more assumptive. Hey, if you're like most clients that fill this thing out, my assumption is that you've dealt with someone in your family, friends, church, work, whatever, that's passed recently, and you've seen some stuff happen. Almost always it's yes. Most people in their 60s and 70s know someone that's died very recently. My wife's parents are like 70, early to mid 70s, and it feels like they go to a funeral 10 of them a year, from people they grew up with or whatever. So they're around that stuff a lot. So for me, once I can expose that story, then I start asking details, like what happened, who died, how'd they die, was it expected, was it not? A lot of times it's not. What did that do to the family? What was it like? What was the cost? Who had to pay? Did they have to, go to church and ask for money? Did they have, who had to make the phone call to collect the money? I just ask a lot of questions. And if they're like, no, they had insurance, got it, was it enough? Yes. What do you think would have happened if there wasn't insurance? And I can start getting that story. That's a big help for me in final expense appointments. The more, if you guys can learn to spend 10 minutes talking about the why, instead of just getting yeah, they'd be in trouble, and going, all right, here's your pricing, you know what I mean, and just moving forward. I remember that was probably the biggest mistake I made in those appointments, is just kind of moving through it too quick. So what I was telling this guy is I'd have found out more about the daughter in this case. The guy said she'd be in trouble. So I go, all right, define in trouble. How would she physically, first of all, does she know she has to pay 10 grand when you die? Have you told her that yet? Because the answer is always no. And I'm going, all right, do we need to call her now and let her know? Or are you in a situation where you just want to take care of it so she doesn't ever have to worry about that or have that burden? Right? I'm very assumptive, trial close type stuff. And again, it's hard to say no. Who's going to say, yeah, let's call her so she knows, because I don't want to help her. You know what I mean? It's hard to when you ask the right leading questions. And they'd go, no, yeah, I don't want to leave a burden. Okay, got it. if you happen to drop dead like before we sign the paperwork right now, what would it look like for her? Meaning, who would she call first? She doesn't have the money. She doesn't know she has to have the money. Now suddenly she's in charge of this whole funeral affair. She's going to be freaking out that you're dead. My guess is she's probably not going to be too excited to call the funeral home and call the hospital and call and organize and call all these people. It's not going to be fun, I assume. No. All right, well, who would she have to call first? This one, whoever. And now's the hard part for me with this guy, because depending on her answers determines my next questions, right? So I'm going to just use generalities based on past experiences. Maybe they go, mom, which is an ex-wife. Maybe they go a sister, a brother, cousin, uncle, whatever. All right, what do you think that call looks like for her? Asking Uncle Larry for 10 grand. And does Larry have 10 grand? Does he know he's like second in line for you guys hitting him up for 10 grand? No, he doesn't. You know what I mean? Or maybe you get that, yeah, my Uncle Larry has a bunch of money. Cool. No offense. What if Uncle Larry ain't here when you die? If that's your only plan, that doesn't sound like a great one, does it? You know what I mean? I can always come up with a question that's going to help them discover what they're saying as this mechanism of pushback, because they're afraid to make decisions and they're procrastinators by nature, that makes them sound really dumb without me having to say it. Our inclination when we're new is to just talk and go like, yeah, my Uncle Larry. And then we give them all these reasons why that doesn't work, which none of those reasons are wrong, but it's your idea, not the client's. So if I can pose it in question format, right, it resonates more with the client we're sitting with, because now they have to put some thought process into it and think. So in that situation, I probably would have asked about if there's grandkids. I don't know the answer in this case. I'd ask if there's grandkids. What would that do to affect your grandkids? I assume you don't want to see them have to struggle further because they're having to watch mom figure this thing out. And I would just get intimate details about what she would have to do. You know what I mean? And you start talking to people. Like, I remember a lot of situations where people were vague about it, or we'll figure it out. And I'd go like, hey, Mary, Bob drops dead right here on the kitchen floor when I leave. Besides 911, who's the first person you're calling? And that gets them like visualizing and feeling it and feel the emotion when you have to start thinking about that detailed a question. So if you guys can, like, before you move on to show pricing, you should be able to explain to me or your manager or someone else what level of detail this death benefit check is going to prevent from happening. What we sell is way more about what it does for them than what it is for them. But when you start selling, it prevents your daughter from having to call Uncle Larry or whoever to get money, and it prevents her from having to, take the kids out of recreational sports to come up with your thing. And when it prevents all this stuff from happening, that's worth $80, $100 a month, whatever it is a month. 10 grand just for $80. Now, I mean, at that point, it's like a commodity. It doesn't matter. They can get it for 3 cents cheaper somewhere else. But if you get this level of detail, I've never heard a situation where someone, like, if you had the opportunity to go back in time and take away all the disaster for merely $80 a month, no one would say no to that. They'd all agree. So we need to get them to articulate and feel, more importantly, feel the pain of the reality that's coming to them. Does that make sense? You as new agents, me as a new agent, anybody else as a new agent, our questions are so limited, and we're so ready to move on to show pricing because we think that's where people buy, that we don't actually let them on the inside feel any of this emotion through explaining how hard it's going to be. And you'll get people, if you do this right, you get people choked up. When they start talking, like, you start having conversations, like you watching, sit down with your family tonight and start talking about intimate details of what would happen if you died. What your wife, spouse, husband, whatever, live in, daughter, kid, son, mom, dad, what they would have to go through. Literally walk through it and tell me you don't get emotional. It can't happen, and you guys have to learn to better draw out that emotion in there through details. And now when the check prevents all those details, life is good, things stay on the books, it's an easier transaction. And now we just got to close them. You know what I mean? If now at the end after you go sell pricing, now what you got to do is go sell them. You know, and a lot of times I get when I ask questions like this, like, what did you say? What were they gonna do? A lot of times the answer from you agents is, well, you know, after pricing, you go like, that's what I started to tell them that. When they said no, I said, what would your daughter do? What would this? What would, I'm like, so you started asking the questions, but you waited until they told you no on pricing first. And now it doesn't have the impact. Because now all the answers they give you are just solely to get you out of the house. Because they have the pricing, which they want, right? And you're going to allow them to procrastinate because you didn't make them feel any pain points early on that gets them to move. So if you start asking all those questions after you show them pricing, you sound like a schmuck sales guy, right? We've all done that. So ask those detailed questions up front, get more specifics, get more details. And I can remember quite a few times, man, where clients were like kind of semi in, and they'd go, yeah, I don't know, I guess my kids are gonna have to figure it out. And before I got into details, I'd be like, Bob, I know you don't want to go out like that, do you? And I would just look at them. And when they really think about that, dude, no one wants to leave their family like that. They're just messing with you because you didn't do your job well enough by asking them enough questions to get somebody who spent 60, 70 years procrastinating. They're going to keep trying to procrastinate. So push people, ask more detailed questions, get the story. When they say, people say, paint me a picture, I like to view it as a movie playing out. Details matter in situations like that. So hopefully it helps. Use it. You can use it in any appointment. If you guys need anything, let us know. Later.